February 24, 2010, 11:40 p.m., Budapest, Hungary. A cold wind was sweeping through the deserted streets of the city, but within the corridors of power, a movement had already begun, one that would go on to change the direction of the entire nation in the years to come. On that very night, Viktor Mihály Orbán initiated a return that could not be described merely as an electoral victory, but rather as the first step in a long-term strategy of control. It was a moment when power, hidden beneath the layers of democracy, slowly began to concentrate in the hands of a single individual. Over time, this expansion of power did not remain limited to the parliament alone. The judiciary, considered the backbone of any democracy, gradually began to lose its independent character. Through new laws and regulations, changes were introduced in the processes of judicial appointments and retirements, making it possible to remove older, independently minded judges and replace them with more favorable faces. Inside courtrooms, decisions were no longer influenced solely by the rule of law, but increasingly by signals from those in power. All of this unfolded so quietly and systematically that the general public did not grasp its depth until it was far too late. Parallel to this, control over the police system was also strengthened. Under the pretext of security, new structures and powers made the police more powerful than ever before. However, this power did not remain confined to preventing crime. Surveillance over dissenting voices increased, strict measures were taken against protesters, and gradually, an environment was created where expressing disagreement itself became a risk. Silence began to spread across the streets, but beneath that silence lay a deep layer of fear. The media, which serves as the most powerful medium for revealing truth, was not untouched by these changing dynamics. Ownership of major news organizations shifted, and editorial policies slowly began to align with those in power. Voices that raised questions were either pushed to the margins or completely silenced. News was no longer just a reflection of events, it became a tool to shape public perception. Every report, every analysis seemed to flow in a predetermined direction. But every story has a turning point, and here it came with the gradual rise of a new name, Péter Magyar. Initially, this name was heard only within limited circles, but soon it emerged as the face of a broader movement. Without relying on powerful organizations or large platforms, he began reaching out directly to people. Moving from village to village, city to city, door to door, he connected with citizens, listened to their problems, and spoke about an alternative path. This approach was unconventional, yet it proved effective. While those in power had no shortage of resources, this emerging figure stood solely on public trust. Gradually, that trust transformed into a wave, and it was at this moment that he became a real challenge to the establishment. From there, events began to accelerate. A significant section of the media started portraying this rising figure as a threat. Various allegations were directed at him, the most serious being that of treason. These accusations were not aimed at just one individual, but at the very idea of change he represented. Across news coverage, debates, and public discourse, an atmosphere was created in which this movement was framed as suspicious and dangerous. Yet, despite this, the dialogue that had begun among the people refused to stop. The more pressure increased, the deeper the movement grew. It was no longer just a political struggle. It had become a battle between trust and fear. On one side stood a fully established and powerful system, and on the other, a voice steadily reaching every household. As time passed, the conflict only intensified. Each day brought new challenges, and each night ended with new strategies. But the most striking aspect of this entire story was that everything was unfolding in plain sight, and yet the truth remained veiled. People were watching, listening, but the process of truly understanding was still ongoing. This story is not just about two individuals. It is about a system where the balance between power and freedom is constantly shifting. It is the story of a nation going through a silent internal struggle, where every step, every decision, and every voice carries deep meaning. And perhaps the greatest question remains: in which direction will this struggle ultimately lead? Toward change or toward an even tighter grip of control? March 18th, 2024, 7:10 p.m. A crowded square in Budapest. In the mild cold, the gathering of people appeared unusually quiet, as if every face was caught between an unspoken fear and a fragile hope. In this atmosphere, the image of Peter Magyar began to grow clearer. He was no longer just a name, but a symbol, one that embodied the courage to stand against a system entrenched in power for years. But as his influence expanded, so did the unseen forces working against him. The structures built over years within the state were now revealing their full strength. The administrative machinery, already under control, began closely monitoring every step associated with this emerging movement. From small gatherings to large public events, the scope of surveillance widened significantly. This was not merely about security. It was part of a broader strategy aimed at weakening any potential challenge before it could fully take shape. At the same time, another shift became evident within the country. The tone of conversations among ordinary citizens had changed. Where people once spoke freely, hesitation and restraint had taken hold. Every word was now measured, every opinion carefully weighed before being expressed. This fear was not always visible, but it was deep enough to begin shaping behavior across all levels of society. Under the leadership of Viktor Mihály Orbán, this system had moved beyond mere political control and evolved into a psychological framework. People's thoughts, priorities, and even their beliefs were gradually being molded to fit within this structure. This is the point where power becomes both most profound and most invisible. Yet no system is without its cracks, and here too they slowly began to appear. As Peter Magyar's outreach expanded, the suppressed questions within people started to surface. In villages, small towns, and corners of cities, discussions cautiously began to return. Slowly, carefully, but persistently. It was a gradual process, but its impact ran deep. The response from those in power was equally swift and calculated. Accusations of treason were amplified with greater intensity. This was not just a legal charge, but a social signal, a warning that anyone who chose this path would face similar consequences. Across television channels, newspapers, and digital platforms, a single narrative was repeated over and over, reinforcing this perception. Despite this, something was working against the entire design. The more pressure increased, the more this movement found its place among the people. What had started as political resistance was now transforming into an emotional connection. People began linking it to their own lives, their future, and their identity. As the night deepened and the lights spread across the streets of Budapest, this conflict became even more visible. On one side stood a system whose roots had grown so deep over the years that it seemed almost impossible to shake. And on the other side was a wave steadily, persistently moving forward. The clash now seemed only a matter of time. In the end, this story does not conclude with a single outcome. Instead, it leaves behind an open question. Can a lone voice withstand a highly organized and controlled system? Or will that very voice become the spark that transforms the entire structure? The answer still lies hidden in the future. But one thing is certain. This struggle will only grow deeper and more decisive in the times to come.